400 million people every single week, a $13 billion partnership with the largest software company on the planet, embedded into Apple's operating system, contracted by the United States government. A valuation that puts it ahead of almost every company in the world. By any conventional measure, OpenAI is one of the most successful technology companies in history, and it got there in under a decade. But here's what's strange about those numbers. If you go back to the documents that created OpenAI, the actual founding charter, signed in December 2015, you will not find a single word about profit, not one. Because it wasn't built to make money. It was built legally and explicitly as a nonprofit. A company whose assets were permanently committed to humanity, not to investors, not to a board, not to any individual. So how does a nonprofit become a $300 billion company preparing for a Wall Street IPO? And how does the man who signed that founding charter, who publicly described his own equity stake in 2023 as almost none, end up personally worth approximately $3 billion? That is the story we are telling today. Not the story of how OpenAI grew, but the story of what it cost. Before we get into how this happened, it's worth being precise about what OpenAI actually is, because a lot of coverage treats it as a tech company story, a startup that scaled, a CEO who navigated a difficult boardroom, the kind of corporate drama that Silicon Valley produces every few years. It is none of those things. What makes this story different, genuinely different, is that OpenAI was not built despite knowing the risks of concentrated AI power. It was built specifically because its founders understood those risks better than almost anyone alive. They designed the entire legal structure of the organization to protect against the outcome that has since come to pass. And it happened anyway. To understand how, we need to go back to 2015. By 2015, the people who understood artificial intelligence best were also the most afraid of it. Not in a science fiction way, in a very specific, technically grounded way. Their concern was this: every major AI lab in the world was inside a for-profit company. Google had acquired DeepMind. Facebook had hired the world's top researchers. The race was accelerating fast. And because every one of those labs answered to shareholders, there was a structural incentive to move quickly and suppress any concern that slowed them down. The researchers inside those labs were not naive. They understood that the technology they were building could, if mishandled, produce an irreversible concentration of power, a single entity capable of outperforming every human institution, every government, every competing organization, in every domain simultaneously. There would be no second chance, no course correction. So a small group decided to try something Silicon Valley had almost no framework for. They would build a nonprofit, no equity, no profit motive, no shareholders demanding returns. Every dollar earned would flow back into the mission. Every asset the company ever created would belong to humanity, legally, permanently, by design. Sam Altman, then president of Y Combinator, became CEO. Elon Musk co-chaired the board. Ilya Sutskever, one of the most respected AI researchers alive, left a senior position at Google to join them. Think about what that actually means. Some of the most commercially ambitious people in an industry built entirely on wealth creation chose voluntarily to walk away from any financial stake in what they believed could become the most powerful technology in human history. They did it because they believed the mission was more important than the money. For 3 years, that held. By 2018, the economics had become impossible to ignore. Training a competitive AI model requires computing power on a scale that is genuinely difficult to visualize. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Just to run experiments, just to remain relevant in a field that was moving faster than anyone had anticipated. Donations were never going to cover it, and everyone in the room knew it. Elon Musk, who had co-chaired the board and been among the loudest voices for keeping AI out of corporate hands, proposed a solution. He would take operational control of OpenAI and integrate it directly with Tesla's infrastructure. The board declined. Musk resigned. Sam Altman was now running a billion-dollar operation with no reliable funding model. His answer was a structure they called a capped profit subsidiary. Investors could now put money in. They could earn a return. But that return was capped at 100 times their investment. Anything beyond that, they said, would flow back to the nonprofit. They called it a creative compromise. Microsoft understood the opportunity immediately. In 2019, they invested $1 billion. For the first time in OpenAI's history, there were people inside the funding structure who expected a financial return. The nonprofit was still technically intact, but it now shared a building with a competing incentive. And competing incentives in Silicon Valley tend to resolve in a predictable direction. For the next few years, OpenAI remained mostly a topic for researchers and insiders. There was buzz, but it was contained. Then on November 30th, 2022, everything changed. OpenAI launched ChatGPT. 1 million users in 5 days, 100 million users in 60 days. It was the fastest technology adoption in recorded history. Faster than the iPhone, faster than Instagram, faster than anything that had ever been built. Overnight, OpenAI went from a research institution to a household name. And with that name, recognition came an almost unlimited appetite for investment. In January 2023, Microsoft expanded their partnership, investing a further $10 billion. The deal embedded OpenAI's technology across virtually every product Microsoft made. Every spreadsheet, every search engine, every cloud server, every line of code written through GitHub. By mid-2024, Apple announced that ChatGPT would be integrated directly into iOS 18, putting OpenAI inside the operating system of more than 1 billion devices worldwide. The partnership list kept growing. Enterprise clients, government contracts, international deployments. Every week, another institution handing OpenAI access to more data, more users, more infrastructure. The nonprofit now sat at the center of what was rapidly becoming the most strategically important technology company on the planet, and hundreds of billions of dollars were waiting to flow in, if only the structure would allow it. Sam Altman made a decision. It's Friday. November 17th, 2023, Sam Altman receives a calendar invitation, an urgent call from members of the board. He joins. There are 4 people on the screen. The message is immediate and it is blunt. Sam, you're fired. The board's official statement cited a lack of candor, a pattern of not being fully transparent with the people responsible for overseeing the company. No specific public allegations, no formal investigation, just 4 people on a video call, ending the tenure of one of the most prominent CEOs in the world. What the board almost certainly did not anticipate was what came next. Within 24 hours, 700 of OpenAI's 770 employees had signed an open letter. The message was unambiguous: reinstate Sam Altman, or every single one of us walks out. Microsoft publicly announced they were prepared to hire Altman and his entire team immediately, no conditions, no delay. The board had built a governance structure specifically designed to protect the founding mission from exactly this kind of commercial pressure. Independent directors, no profit motive, a legal mandate to prioritize humanity over shareholders. It was the last institutional safeguard between OpenAI and full corporate control. That structure lasted 96 hours. On November 21st, Sam Altman walked back into OpenAI as CEO. Every board member who had voted to remove him was replaced, with figures aligned with the company's commercial direction. With the governance board gone, the transformation accelerated rapidly. In 2024, OpenAI initiated the formal process of converting to a full for-profit company. Sam Altman addressed it carefully. The nonprofit entity, he said, would still exist. It would receive a financial stake in the new structure. The mission, in his words, remained unchanged. The numbers told a different story. The original 100 times profit cap, quietly eliminated. The independent governance board, replaced. The founding charter, now buried inside a corporate structure, being engineered for a Wall Street IPO. In 2024, Elon Musk filed a lawsuit. He described it plainly as a bait and switch, the conversion of a company built on donated capital, on a legally binding promise to humanity, into a private empire being optimized for investors, without the consent of the people who funded that promise. Then in April 2026, The New Yorker published an 18-month investigation, based on private emails, internal memos, and interviews with former board members. The report described what it characterized as a consistent, deliberate pattern of deception at the highest levels of the company. Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, the man who had arguably done more than anyone to advance Sam Altman's career, told colleagues that Altman had been lying to them throughout. And one former board member, someone who had worked alongside him for years, used a single word to describe him: So what was the fatal mistake? It's tempting to point to the for-profit conversion, but every serious AI lab in the world requires capital at this scale. That part may have been genuinely unavoidable. It's tempting to point to the boardroom coup, but from a strategic standpoint, that decision was coherent, if ruthless. The fatal mistake was something less dramatic, and it's the kind of mistake that only becomes fully visible in hindsight. Sam Altman built the world's most powerful AI company on a single competitive advantage. And that advantage was not technology. Google had comparable technology. Meta had more engineers. Microsoft had more capital. OpenAI's advantage was moral authority. It was the only AI lab that governments trusted enough to partner with openly. The only lab that regulators genuinely deferred to. The only lab whose research the global academic community cited without hesitation. The only lab that the world's best researchers chose, often over better-paying alternatives, because they believed it was fundamentally different. The only lab that 400 million people handed their most personal questions to, every single week without a second thought. All of that was built on one thing: the belief that OpenAI was not in this for the money. By dismantling the governance board, by accumulating $3 billion in personal equity, while publicly describing himself as holding almost none. By converting a company built on donated capital and a legal promise to humanity into a private empire being prepared for an IPO, Sam Altman traded OpenAI's single most valuable and irreplaceable asset for a valuation number. And the cost is only beginning to become clear. Competitors are closing the gap faster than most people realize. Anthropic, founded by former OpenAI researchers who left specifically over these concerns, is growing. Meta is releasing its most capable open source models. Even Microsoft has quietly begun diversifying, moving resources toward alternatives. Regulators in the United States and Europe are circling. The trust that took a decade to build is the kind of asset you only notice when it's gone. OpenAI now faces a question it may never be able to fully answer. The story of OpenAI is still unfolding. An IPO is expected later in 2026. Sam Altman will in all likelihood emerge as one of the wealthiest people in Silicon Valley. The technology will keep advancing, with or without the guardrails that the founders once considered essential. But the question that drove 12 people into a room in December of 2015, what happens when the most transformative technology in human history is controlled by a single, powerful entity? That question is now more relevant than it has ever been, because that entity exists, and it used to answer to all of us. I'm curious what you think. Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. You are watching Empira. I'll see you in the next one.